Yeah, hello and welcome to my presentation about globalization. Before I start, please find my sources at the end, as I, for practical reason, won't mention them very explicit, but just refer more or less shallow. So first off, we have a definition of globalization from class from Financial Times, and as there is no true definition of globalization, I believe this one comes quite close to consensus. Even though it emphasizes trade and economics a bit more than other aspects, this is not necessarily wrong. Um, but yeah, you can often see the bias because the first mentioned factor is trade, so it says through the global network of trade and communication, etc. And moreover, we know that Financial Times is a part of Nikkei, the Asian Stock Index, and it in general just moreover covers the economy and politics in general. But it has been necessary to, what could you say, broaden the definition of globalization over the past 20 years because of the initial economic integration that Financial Times says has also led to cultural integration. So, in the more recent past, globalization was often primarily focused on the economic side of the world, such as trade and foreign direct investments and international capital flows, etc. And more recently, the term has expanded to include a broader range of areas and activities such as culture, fake news, and even biological factors. So, even though we call it globalization, this chart shows that it still is most a concern for open and Western economies, especially European economies. Okay, so the first issue I've chosen to deal with is plastic pollution or the aftermath of consumption, as I call it. Because globalization is not only a better process, as it also causes trouble. Um, so many of us have seen pictures like the one attached on social media and alike, alarming us that the end is near, at least the end of rainforest or food logs on the beach without spotting leftovers from plastic or what is also pollution. So one might ask, what has this to do with globalization? So all these plastics is very convenient as it used in cables, in planes and computer and mobile phones, and it's sort of facilitating a rapid growth of global communication and transport system, among others. And moreover, plastic itself is based on dispersed production chain, so it's spanning from oil in Saudi Arabia to the plastic production in Taiwan, for example. And for these reasons, globalization plays a key role in the life cycle, both in production and in its demand. Um, but what is crucial is that plastic moves, so it disregard national borders, you could say. So hence the globalization of plastic pollution blurs the lines of responsibility and sort of jeopardize the fairness of distribution effects. So demand in one country can actually fuel the environmental degradation of another country. And EU have, for example, recently tried to ban plastic for this reason, and they have more specifically banned the top 10 plastic products found on European beaches. Some of these items are some we use a lot, such as plastic straws, cotton buds, um, plates, and disposable cutlery. And these will be banned under the new rules. But some would might see it as limitation, but it's also actually a lot of possibilities for sustainable companies and consumers. Because having one set of rules for the whole EU market will maybe create a springboard for European companies to develop economies of scale and be more competitive or be the market leader and so on. And it actually is a um, booming global marketplace, this market for sustainable products. Okay, I think that was it. So let's move on to my um, own choice of a globalization issue that I call threatening sovereignty or It's also called the trilemma from Dan Roderick. So over the last 3 or maybe 4 decades or so, we have had 400 million Chinese that have lived themselves out of extreme poverty. And it's actually called the world's greatest poverty eradication ever experienced. But it would have not been possible if China had not turned itself towards the world, you could say. Because today it had become a exporting superpower and has allowed new employment opportunities. People who come from villages or rural areas can be employed in textile, garment, footwear, but also steel factories. So China has, with a number of other Asian countries, benefited hugely from globalization and what we call the China effect. But in advanced and developed countries, something like, I believe, a third of the respondents in surveys fear for their economic future because of the presence of countries like Bangladesh or China or India and so on. So, but if you're an engineer, manager, or accountant, you would do very well because of your skills and great demand. But the single mother working in a textile plant or the steel worker from the Rust Belt now had to compete with Bangladesh, among others, is to create a downward pressure on wages and employment opportunities. And this dilemma describes the trade-off between hyperglobalization, national sovereignty, and democracy, as you can only have 2 out of 3. And this means that if you want globalization, you must give up either democracy or national sovereignty. And many has chosen, for example, national sovereignty and democracy, while we have seen a increasing populism, contributing to what calls globalism, which is a backlash of the globalized movement we've seen the last decades. And lastly, I have some pros and cons of globalization. But as I'm running out of time, I will just let the slide speak for itself, as I believe it very much concludes on my point from the past slides. And of course, my sources, some of them at least. Thank you very much.